Hey, welcome back to Hooked on Christmas. Today we're starting a video series called The Origins of Christmas. Back around Father's Day, I went bike riding with my daughter because I'm trying to lose weight because I'm tired of looking like Father Christmas. And we got to talking about the holidays and how the holidays around our family and our family dynamic is working, and we got into Christmas. Of course, we got into Christmas, and my daughter was basing everything around the nativity and the birth of Christ. And I said, "You do know that Christmas began before Christ?" And she looked at me with that, "What you talking about was look." And so I decided that I would take the History Channel's video and break it down into four 10-minute segments, to really go into why we celebrate Christmas, why does this happen at a certain time of the year, what influences that influence our Christmas today, where does some of these things come from. Even though the History Channel video touches on them, I want to try to get into a little bit more in depth in it. So, you guys ready for this Origins of Christmas adventure? Let's get to it.
It is a story everyone knows. After a rude refusal by a local innkeeper, Mary and Joseph bedded down in a barn in Bethlehem. The next day, Mary gave birth to a son, the Son of God. Those are the biblical origins of Christmas. But centuries before Jesus walked the earth, early Europeans were celebrating light and birth in the darkest days of winter. In the Norse country, this winter celebration was known as Yule. Around December 21st, the Winter Solstice, fathers and sons would drag home the biggest log they could find and set it on fire. The Yule log warmed, but it also looked ahead. Each spark was said to represent a pig or calf to be born in the spring. Also dragged inside were evergreens, the one plant that could make it through a Norse winter. Evergreens proved that life persisted in this dark time.
There's a natural attraction to that which lives through the winter when one is struggling to survive through the winter. The evergreen is that part of nature that seems impervious to the coming of winter and the diminishing of the sun. And so it's an absolutely natural symbol, one which I think we react to almost without thinking about.
For as long as the Yule log burned, about 12 days, feasting and revelry reigned supreme. In fact, this was one of the few times that meat was abundant, since cattle had just been slaughtered for the long winter.
There is a necessity to kill most of the cattle, because you can't keep them alive over the winter when there's nothing to feed them on. You keep a few alive for breeding. But there is an opportunity for a great blowout, for a great feast, time to party.
The party raged inside in defiance of winter's deadly howl.
There is a spooky feel about the northern Yuletide festivals. You may be all right there in the hall with the blazing fires, but outside there are demons, there are spirits.
In Germany, the pagan god Odin lent his name to this midwinter holiday. Early Germans were terrified of Odin, whose nocturnal flights decided who would prosper or perish in the coming year. Later, we'd see another Christmas sky rider, Santa Claus. But for now, staying inside became the smartest choice at this frightening time of the year. A 1,000 miles away in Rome, winter was less harrowing, but the December festivals were just as elaborate. 1 week before the winter solstice, Romans began celebrating Saturnalia, a month-long orgy of food and drink. Named for the god Saturn, which meant plenty, Rome's established order was turned on its head during this wild, delirious time.
The Saturnalia celebrations were certainly times of revelry, of turning the social order upside down, of having the master pretend to be the slave and the slave pretend to be the master, sort of a time out of time in which one could celebrate a kind of disorder in the universe.
One of the holiday's important feasts was Juvenalia, which celebrated the children of Rome.
Although these early festivals are not necessarily about children particularly, though they are about fertility, children did have their particular place. The indulgence of children, of course, is very much a part of our modern Christmas, but it did have its place even in these ribald, drunken festivals that the Romans had.
Now let's talk about it. The winter solstice. Now, the winter solstice is something that happens every year, like clockwork. It is something that Mother Earth does all the time. And the Merriam-Webster formal definition of the winter solstice is the point in the sky occupied by the sun on or about December 22nd, when winter begins in the northern hemisphere, the December solstice. This also happens in the southern hemisphere as well. The Encyclopedia Britannica goes into the winter solstice, also called the hibernacles solstice, the 2 months during the year when the path of the sun in the sky is farthest south in the northern hemisphere. Again, this is a natural phenomenon that happens every year. And so when you have cultures around the world, when these things happen, depending on where you were around the world, you develop traditions that you did in your cultures back in ancient times, so A.D., before Christ's time. Now, one of those was Yule, which I think is more prominent today to most of us out there. And Yule is a celebration that was more of the Norse tradition. So when we say Norse, we're talking Vikings, and we're talking cold. It is cold where they are. And this was a festival that they had. It says here its roots are complicated and difficult to trace, although there are several theories about how and why the festival was celebrated. So one of the main things of this festival was that they were kind of leery of the darkness, because the area where they were in kind of spooky. And it was dark, and those areas where you don't get sunlight for a certain period of time, people develop superstitions and things of that nature. And so during this time, they would go out and get the biggest log they could find. They would bring it inside and burn it for 12 days. Also during this time period, they couldn't keep the cattle alive during the winter months, because again, they didn't have the comforts that we have today. So they slaughtered a lot of the cattle and only kept what they needed for to grow the cattle again the next year. So they had a lot of meat on hand. So out of this became basically a party. And they basically ate well and reveled around the fire. And just had a good merry old time. Nothing was really demonic about it. It was just that their tradition at the time. Now, Of course, later on, when you introduced the Norse gods, Odin, and they started having little rituals around that. So you have to read into that, and you know, if you want, click so you can completely read this as well. Now, the next piece they have is Saturnalia, which was talked about in the History Channel. Saturnalia was a Roman festival that literally started out as a one-day festival to the Roman god Saturn. Then went to like 3 days, then 7 days. And if you know anything about Roman parties, you know what kind of party it was. And it was a lot of revelry, but it was also based around the winter solstice and the time where they were of goodwill and that the harvest and everything was good there. And of course, you saw in the History Channel video how the different things and different festivals that happened during that time. Now, one of the things I want to point out, and I wanted to bring this up, that this is a map of the Roman Empire in 117 AD. Now, notice Rome is actually in here. Right here is in Italy. However, Rome went out and conquered all these people, all the way from Britannica down here in the northern top of Africa, to Israel, Palestine, all these areas, parts of Turkey, and all these areas, they occupied. Now, herein comes the rub. How do you control all these people when they have traditions that they've been doing before you conquered them? And so herein comes the Roman Catholic Church and the church as itself, and they can't stop them from doing these things. So they started to incorporate what they were doing. So hence, this is when you start bringing in all the different things that these different cultures were doing and trying to make them into a celebration. But just to give you, I wanted to show the map because it shows you all the areas that Rome conquered, and thusly all the areas of different people in that area that did different things at this time of the year during the winter solstice. It's not Christmas yet. It's just a winter solstice celebration. Now, I bet you didn't know, but there are other areas in the world that actually have winter solstice celebrations, and I pulled out two. And the one is called Ra God ritual, which is an Egyptian celebration to the homecoming of Ra, the sun god, for keeping the land and the crops warm. So even the Egyptians had a celebration for the god Ra. And then also all the way down in Peru with the Incan people, and please excuse my pronunciation, but I call it Inti Rama, and it is a celebration of the festival of the sun, and a time for giving warmth and light. All right, so all the way down in Peru, they were still having a celebration during the winter solstice, which brings us back to this map of the Roman Empire, and its hold over all these people for such a long period of time. So now what you have is all of these areas mixing together.
Among the upper classes in Rome, solstice celebrations were significantly more sober. Many influential Romans worshipped Mithra, the god of the unconquerable sun. To this small but powerful sect, the birthday of Mithra was the holiest day of the year.
December 25th was the winter solstice in that part of the world, and it was also understood to be the birthday of the sun god, Mithra. And Mithra was said to be born from a rock. Shepherds came to worship him as he was an infant god born out in that pastoral place in the fields. And many of those stories, of course, have come into Christian tradition.
While Romans were worshiping the sun god, a new religion was taking hold throughout the empire. At first, Christians didn't celebrate the birth of Christ. His resurrection was the essential fact of the new religion. By the 4th century, however, the question of the holy birth became impossible to ignore. For Christians, the fact of his birth was settled, but the date remained a mystery. The Bible doesn't mention exactly when Christ was born, but certain facts suggest it probably was not in December.
So if you're going to sort through the runes of the scriptures, Jesus was probably born in the spring. If the shepherds are out in the fields watching their flock by night, we're not talking about one of the cold spells at the heart of winter.
If pagan Rome was already celebrating the birth of Mithra on December 25th, it seemed natural to honor the birth of the Christ child at the same time. By the 4th century, the church made it official. December 25th was declared the feast day of the Nativity.
But of course it's a very short step from the feast day of the risen sun, S-U-N, to the feast day of the risen sun, S-O-N. So in a sense, it's a very good choice, and the symbolism is there because, the feast day of the unconquered sun was about fertility, about birth, and so obviously is the Christian Christmas.
The church knew it could not outlaw the pagan traditions of Christmas, so it set out to adopt them. The evergreens traditionally brought inside were soon decorated with apples, symbolizing the Garden of Eden. These apples would eventually become Christmas ornaments. And holly, a traditional midwinter decoration, was recast to represent Christ's crown of thorns.
People already had their own agenda for this season, and that agenda was not one that was really radically changed when the names got changed from non-Christian to Christian names. The church pretty much had a policy of live and let live. If people would call themselves Christians and do lip service to the birth of the Savior, then let them do anything that they wanted to do with it. But on the other hand, by assigning the Nativity to that time of year, the church really gave up the opportunity to control the way that celebration took place.
The tension between piety and revelry at Christmas would reach its logical and extreme conclusion in Puritan England, when the holiday would be considered so un-Christian it was done away with altogether.
Okay, now you see that they have Mithra. And Mithra is an Indo-Iranian mythology. So again, the Romans went and conquered over there in Iran and then absorbed what they were doing over there. So Roman soldiers and the elite did the things with Mithra. And then Mithra. So again, here we are, all the way over here in Rome, and they conquered these people, and then they brought what they were doing here, over here in the Iranian section, and brought it back to Rome. Oh, so now you got all these things mixing, but the Roman Church decided to, now, as we're now pushing Christianity, and we're pushing Catholicism throughout the realm, we're going to replace the god Mithra, the little g, and we're going to replace it with the birth of Christ. Now, noted in the video, we as Christians initially did not celebrate the birth of our Lord and Savior. It was more so we were the resurrection. However, in order to bring this into the fold, they decided to remove Mithra on the 25th of December and put the birth of Jesus on that day. Now, in the video, the guy states that Jesus was born in the spring of the year. And there are some that say more the fall of the year. Even again, we don't quite know exactly when Jesus was born. But But the 25th was adopted by the church as the official birth of Jesus. So that's how we kind of got there. Kind of wild, right? So now I want to talk to you guys about pagan. And it's the Merriam-Webster formal definition: a person who practices a contemporary form of paganism, such as Wicca. Encyclopedia Britannica goes into neo-paganism, family of new religions that all take their inspiration from the extinct pre-Christian religions of Europe, North Africa, and West Asia. Okay, again, the Romans went out, conquered all those people. All these people had their rituals and everything else. Here enters Christianity. Christianity now replaces that. However, some people still want to do the things that they were doing because that was handed down through the generations. Now that's Christian traditions or Winter Solstice traditions. This is not the actual practice of Wicca. Okay, so where the definition here says Wicca, when you're talking about these Winter Solstice celebrations, they're just a celebration during the Winter Solstice, not the actual practice of Wicca or one of these neo-pagan religions. So I just wanted to touch that because some people go, oh, that's pagan, and place it under a religion when actuality it's just something that was done during the time of the Winter Solstice. And it's not something that's done day in and day out all year long like Wicca is. It is only done during the Winter Solstice. Just wanted to touch on that. So now we get to the traditions that we do during the Winter Solstice, that we do and just don't even know about it. And one of those is a part of Yule, and it's called mistletoe. Now, for most of us, we know mistletoe. You know, get under the mistletoe, kiss your loved one, and be merry. But mistletoe to the people in the North was a theme of good luck because, like the Christmas tree that they brought in, because Christmas trees never, or the evergreen tree, never actually turned brown or dropped its leaf. So did the mistletoe. And when they found it, they would take it out of the tree. They would take it and put it on top of everyone's doorstep for good luck, because that meant good luck. So hence, it's a good luck to have mistletoe over your home. Of course, we have now said that, hey, you're standing under mistletoe, got to give your loved one a kiss. Well, you could probably say that's good luck too. Another tradition is the Yule log, and we talked about that earlier, where the Norse people brought the big log in and set it ablaze. And that's something that we do every Christmas. If you have a fireplace, we put a log on the fire. A lot of people like to go and look at either on YouTube or on TV a crackling log while they're listening to Christmas music. And so that's where that Yule log comes from, but it's actually the burning of a very big log for about 12 days. But in Holland, they celebrate it a little different, where they still have the Yule log, but then they take the leftovers of the Yule log, the burnt pieces, and they place them under their beds so that it will give them their home protection from lightning strikes. This is again because of the Norse gods and Thor and Odin and those of that nature. But we go all the way to France and the French people, and the Yule log is something totally different. It is actually a sponge cake spread with buttercream and rolled into a log, and it's some kind of good. And I just love those. You got to make sure I order one for this Christmas. But again, those are some of the traditions that we do. And I guarantee you, in your home, in your family, you have had traditions handed down to you that you may not really understand, And maybe you need to sit down and talk to your grandmother and your grandfather and your great aunts and ask them, where did this start? Where did this begin? Because some of these traditions may even come back from your ancestors from Africa or from Asia or from Europe or from Germany or from Scandinavia. You just don't know. All right, I hope you enjoyed this first 10 minutes of the origin of Christmas. I hope it's been informative with you. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comment line. I'll be happy to try to answer them. Also, if you like the video, click the like button as well as hit subscribe, and we will greatly appreciate that. One of the things I was trying to push across here is that this happens every year during the winter solstice, and you have all these different areas around the world who look at the winter solstice a little bit different, especially back when you're talking AD. And then when the Romans came and conquered, now you have all these different cultures intermingling with each other, and they all have their different traditions on way they did things around the winter solstice. It's the same way when you're talking about Samhain during Halloween. And one of the biggest things I want to do, and hopefully I'll be able to do it before the Lord calls me home, is I want to be able to go to these different areas around the world and see how they celebrate Christmas, how they celebrate the winter solstice in their areas, to see where did we get some of the things that we do today. Hey, where did it come from? And to see how other cultures celebrate it in different languages and things of that nature. That's the archaeologist in me, and I just would love to go and understand it. And hopefully I'll be able to bring you videos from Poland and from France and from Greenland and the Norse country, just so that you can see, hey, this is Christmas in Scotland. That would be so cool. So hopefully we'll be able to get there one day. So with all that said, stay tuned for the next one. We're going to be getting into Puritanism. That's going to be fun. So with all that said, thank you guys for watching. Remember, around here is always 'tis the season. Peace.